Hello everyone, welcome to the Summer Workshop. My name is Fehr, I'm a project specialist here at Fehr Yearbooks. In this session, we're going to go over how to create a brand new document from scratch in InDesign, and then take that document and save it as a template so you can use it over and over again. So without any delay, let's get right to it. The first thing you're going to want to do is open up InDesign and look for the Create New button on the left-hand side. Now, in some cases in InDesign, you're going to see a splash screen come up with the Create New option on there as well, or you can go to the File menu on top, go to New, and there should be a document option right on the side here that you can click on to create a brand new document. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Once you get that, you're going to get the new document window. There's going to be a couple of different images or different presets that are already in here from layouts that have been created in the past. We want to make sure that the size is correct and everything for what we're doing. So we're going to go to the right-hand side, and we're going to go over all our different presets. Now I'm going to start off with using Pica's measurement, and then I'll flip over to inches so you can see the conversion. First thing you want to do is you want to make sure you choose the right size for your book. And so in this case, we're going to choose an 8.5 by 11 size book or a size 8 book. And we're going to show, if I click over to the inches option here, you can see that is 8.5 by 11 inches. Next thing you want to make sure the orientation is correct. So the first option here is a portrait, so it's vertical. You want to make sure you know exactly if you're doing a portrait or a landscape book before you get started. And then the second option here is a landscape. For the pages, we want to make sure we put 2 pages for every document. Instead of having a lot of pages all in one document, we're going to have 2 pages and have a number of different documents to work with. It's much better to work with when it comes to having multiple students working on multiple pages. If you were to create a document with 10 pages in it, only one student could work on those 10 pages at one time. So we want to start with 2 pages at a time to make things as efficient as possible. Next option here is the facing pages. So because you're creating a book, all the pages will be facing each other when you're opening and closing the book. So you want to make sure that checkbox is on. The only time you wouldn't have that checkbox on is if you were creating a poster or a single document of some sort. Next is the start page. So the start page also is very important for 2 different reasons. One of them is whenever you're creating a double page spread or a 2-page spread in front of you, whenever you open up a book, you'll notice that the page numbers on the left-hand side are always even, and on the right-hand side, they're always odd. So if you're creating a 2-page document with pages side by side, you always want to start on an even page number. The other reason you want to have that number to be accurate is if you want to create an index for your book, you want to make sure that this page number reflects the actual page that is going to be in the book when it's done. And you can change this later on if you need to, but you want to make sure that page is accurate, especially if you're trying to do an index later on at the end of the book. Next thing we have are some column guides. So column guides are just basically guidelines that go vertical in your layout to help you to adjust your text, your image boxes, sizes, all kinds of different things. That's a good tool for helping designing. I'm going to set it just to 3 as a default for now. Margins. Margins is the area outside of the edge of the page where you want to try to avoid putting a lot of heavy content or any sort of important information outside of those margins. So this is going to be a guideline as to where you want to create your main content and where you want your readers or the people looking at the book to focus on. So I'm going to start with a top margin of 2, bottom of 4, inside of 2, and outside of 3. Now these are Pica measurements. I will flip it over to the inches so you can see it. Whenever you're changing these numbers, also keep in mind that you do have a locking mechanism here. So if I were to click on this locking mechanism, all 4 numbers would change together. So if you change 1, all the rest would change to the same one as well. And so you want to make sure you want to click on this and break that chain link so that way you can change those numbers independently. The next thing we have is the bleed. And so bleed is the area just outside the page edge. Whenever you're running backgrounds or any elements that you want to run off of the edge of the page, you want to make sure that there's a little bit of extra room there just in case for folding and trimming purposes in production. It's all normal to have that kind of setup, so you want to make sure that you have a little bit of extra on the outside of the page, and we want to set that bleed to P9 or 9 points. I'll flip it over to the inches in a second so you can see the conversion. One thing you also notice is that on the right-hand side here, you're going to see that there is a chain link, and that chain link now is together. And you notice on the one above where it's broken, I can change the numbers independently. Here, the chain link has been put together, so all 4 numbers will stay the same no matter which box you type it into. So just keep in mind whenever you're changing sizes or dimensions of any kind, those chain links do come in handy depending on what you're trying to do. The next option is a slug. The slug is not an area or an option that we would use here or anything you would need for your book, so we're just going to ignore that and leave it at 0. So here we're going to go over and pull it over to inches. You can see now I have an 8.5 by 11 book. I have 2 pages. My start page will be 2. I want to start on an even page. Then I have 3 columns as my guideline start. And you can see there the measurements for the margins, and then the bleed, which is 0.125 inches for all four. Once you have all this set and done, what you can do is now you can save this as a preset. So preset just means that you can go into a new document option in InDesign next time around. You can choose this preset. All these numbers will be the same. And the reason for that is that if you have someone else working on this InDesign program at a different time using different size or dimensions for a different project, if you have a preset, that way you can always go back to your original setting of that ENF 11 that you're creating now. So what you can do is you click onto that save button, and we're going to put in yearbook as the preset and save that. So now if you look on the top here, there's a tab here called saved. You can see now I have a yearbook saved preset. So if you ever want to come back and create that document again from scratch, you can start with that preset and all the settings will come into play automatically. After you've set all those in place, we're going to go over and click on to create. Now that we have a new layout open, we're going to go over some of the guidelines and what they're for. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to zoom in into the corner of this layout here. And then we have a red line on the outside of this document. So if you notice right where the gray and the white meet, this line here, that is the trim line. That is where things get cut. So when the book is folded and printed and trimmed in production, this is ideally where that cut is going to be. And that red line on the outside is called our bleed. And we want to make sure that whenever we have any sort of backgrounds or any sort of elements that you want to run right off the edge of the page with no white space in between the edge, you want to treat that as a bleed and you want to move your content to touch that red line to make sure that there is extra room. And so whenever we fold and trim books in production, there's always a tiny bit of variance, which is normal. And so you want to make sure that you extend that content to that bleed line. So when the book is trimmed, then everything gets trimmed properly and you won't see any little white lines on the edge of your page. So for example, if I'm going to go and place an image here, use this image here. So let's just say I wanted this image to run off the edge of the page. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I would move that image all the way so that the outside edges are touching that red line. Now you can go well past if you'd like, but keep in mind where that book or where that image will be trimmed at the final product. So if I go back to my red line here, this is kind of the minimum that you want to do anytime you want an image to bleed. Now, if you don't want an image to bleed off the edge of the page, you want to make sure that you have sufficient enough room on the outside to avoid getting too close to the edge so that nothing gets trimmed off of that image that you don't want to get trimmed. The next guideline we're going to go over are the margin lines. I'm going to get rid of this image for now. And so the margin lines, what you can see is the inside pink line that goes around the whole page that you see there. And so you have your outside, your top, and your inside, and you also have the margin on the bottom. And so typically this area here inside those margin lines is where you want to contain your important content. So your main titles, your body copy, any text, faces, anything important or critical, you'd like to try to keep in that area. And now this is only a recommendation. You can put the content outside of that if you'd like, but just for consistency and to make a nice clean layout that's framed really well, you want to try to keep most of your content inside that margin area if you can. The next things we have are our columns. So you can see now I have 3 columns on this page, and if I move over, I can see 3 columns on the other page. So that's the setting I created from the very beginning when I did that document setup. And so what column guides are for, it could be just basically for lining up your photos, lining up your text, for body copy, anything like that. So for example, if I wanted to use these guidelines to start my layout, I could use, first of all, some of the columns to place an image. So I'm going to go to my file menu, go to place. I'm going to choose a image that I want to use. What I'll do is I'm going to use my corner of my image right on that margin line there, or the column guide there, and I'm going to slint to the other side. So you can see I have 3 columns wide going across the gutter. Now if I were to say create a headline, I could go into column over here. I could create a headline here. And I can also go use this column to create body copy. So now I can use this to line up my text boxes so they're perfectly lined up. It spaces all the layout elements fairly evenly. So that's what the column guides can be used to try to help space out all the different areas of your layout. I'm going to take these elements here and I'm just going to remove them for now. Next thing I want to cover is the pages panel. So on the right hand side, there should be a pages panel. It's usually on the top on the right hand side. If you don't by chance see that panel sitting on that side, if you go to the window menu there should be an option called Pages, and if that checkbox isn't there, when you click on it, it should appear on the side here and allow you to see where that Pages panel is. So any panels you see on the right-hand side will be in this window menu here. Specifically, we're going to go to that Pages panel. So when we set up the document like we did before, we wanted to have a double page spread document. And so you can see now I have my two icons, they're side by side, and it says pages 2 and 3. Now, we talked about how if you're doing an index for your book, you want to make sure that those page numbers reflect what the actual pages are going to be in the book. So if I wanted to change that, I can go into the menu here after highlighting those two pages, go into my numbering and section options. In this page here, I can now change it to a new page number, and then my pages panel will reflect that. Now, in some cases, if you set your page numbers wrong, you'll notice something different in the pages panel. So for example, if I were to go into the numbering and section options again, let's say it do 11. You can see now that the page is now split. You see one on the top right and one on the bottom left because the odd page is always on the right hand side. So that's why this page is separated now. And this is not what you want. If you want to work on a double page spread, you want to be able to make sure those page numbers start on an even page number. So I'm going to go back into my numbering and section options and change it back to 10. There we go. Now I got my pages 10, 11, and they're side by side, and you can see them both together where they are. Next what I'm going to do is we want to make sure we save this page as a template. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the File menu and go into a Save As option. Under Save As, we're going to go into a regular folder. We want to keep page layouts. You can see here I've already labeled some of these files here previously, and you can see how I've numbered them, where it says 002-003, and then I have a title or description afterward. And so this is the kind of numbering that I would recommend for all your layouts. Reason being is that whenever you have your layout stored into one folder, first of all, it's very, very easy to find out which pages, which documents for which pages in your book. And that way there's no confusion. If you label them just with a description, you don't always remember exactly where in that book that page is supposed to be. So always make sure you number your pages first. It sorts them nice and evenly and alphabetically or numerically when you're putting them in your folders. In this case, I just want to create a template instead of saving it as an actual layout. So on the very bottom here, you'll see that there's a file name option here. It'll say untitled for your default. But I'm going to change on the bottom here the Save As type. I'm going to save this to a template. And you can see that the other ones that were there kind of disappear because this is a template file, not a regular InDesign file. And so I'm going to do a mark that as template and hit save. Now the benefit of a template is that it have all the settings and the guidelines in place, and when you double click on a template file to open it, what it's going to do is it's not going to open up the original template file, it's going to open up a copy of it. And so here I'm going to just move over my folder here where I have my template file. You can see here I have my files, I have my template that I've just created now. So if I were to close this layout, go back into my folder and choose template, what it's going to do now is going to open up a brand new document, and you can see right on top it says untitled document. And so now it's a brand new document. It uses the same settings and all the specifics we had with our guidelines, but now open up a new one. You won't overwrite the old file, and that way multiple students can use that to start when they're creating their layouts. That'll be it for this session on how to create a brand new document in InDesign. Feel free to check out the other videos when I go over a number of different other topics like using images and resolution and paragraph styles and all kinds of different things like that. So feel free to check out those videos as well.